So you have heard from Jerry and from Lee and from Steve, thank you, over there, Steve, and from Kimberly and from Mike, some of the questions that we've been asking this year. And that's really what I'm here to talk about, to kind of provide a little bit of a 30,000-foot view of some of the work that we're doing as a congregation right now. There was a time at the annual meeting when I would come before you and say, here's our strategic plan, here are our objectives and goals, here are the strategies we're going to use to get there. So our job is about mobilizing energy and energizing stakeholders and mitigating against competing voices and all of that sort of strategic plan work. This is not that time. The book that I'm reading right now, which is by Susan Beaumont, who's a consultant who's done some work with us, her new book is called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going. That's a little bit of a dark thing to say. The saying is, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So we're going to try to find a way of muddling through. Cottywomple is a word that has been introduced to me. That's British slang for setting off in an intentional way towards an unknown direction. Say it with me, cottywomple. It's British slang. Some of you probably know that word. But that's a way of describing how we're going about doing the work of Trinity Cathedral in this time. So we've been through the Great Disruption, right? Before this all happened, when I stood before you in January of 2020, not that long ago, but oh my gosh, does it seem like that was the last time I stood right in this spot and gave an annual meeting report in Kempton Hall, January of 2020. And you all remember what happened in February of 2020. The world went cattywampus. Before that, church was pretty easy. We were pretty happy. Things were going really well here. Our staff was functioning well. We had just completed a survey. Our drivers of energy and satisfaction, according to our consultant, were like off the charts. There were things we were working on, for sure. Not everybody was thrilled with Trinity, but by and large, we were doing pretty well. And what I said to you in January of 2020 was that if we do our job right and we get re-surveyed in 5 years, that would be 2023 or 24, our numbers should not be that high. We should not be that satisfied. And what I said was, it's time to get unsettled. Well, little did I know. Little did we know, we shut down the campus for a year. We built a community of resilience, and I'm really proud of you, Trinity. I'm really proud of our staff. I'm really proud of each one of you, the leadership that has emerged in this time of anxiety and stress and disruption. It's taught us a lot, actually, about who we really are. There's a saying, we were working yesterday with vestry staff, and we were talking about souls. How do you know where your soul is? How do you know what your soul is? And I like Parker Palmer's definition, right? The soul was the thing when I wasn't even sure I wanted to be alive anymore. The soul was the thing that kept me going. That's how he found his soul. And I think that's true of institutions too. When we're going through a period of profound disruption, it's an opportunity for us to reconnect with our soul. And so one of the ways I want to think about where we've been and where we're going is that we're building a community of resilience. We're a community that is reconnecting with our soul. We experience great loss, and that's often the case when you're in this soul work. There are parishioners that we will not see here again. And we weren't always able to gather in the cathedral and memorialize their lives in the ways that we had grown accustomed to. We've lost all kinds of things. We haven't got our Wednesday night meals back. Our classes have changed. The cathedral campus looks a little bit different. There's loss associated with change, and there's grief associated with that. I think a piece of what we're experiencing in this moment culturally, but certainly here at Trinity, is that there's a lot of grief in this community. There's a lot of trauma in this community. You've all experienced loss in your lives. And so you come to Trinity, and in some ways, I think one of the things that we look for in church, especially when the world feels really wonky, is that we need church to be a place of stability and safety. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. We built a community of resilience. 80% of us have attended a virtual service. 35% of us have participated in online education. Those are numbers from about halfway through the pandemic when we were kind of checking in with you to see how are things working. What are you liking? What are you not liking? We made actually quite a few changes based on the result of that survey. But this congregation really has continued to show up. That number is highlighted because I didn't replace it. More than the actual real number is more like I think it's 248 new pledging units last year and this year. So if you assume that every pledging unit, some pledging units are single people, many pledging units are two people, some pledging units are families of 4, 5, 6. So that's about 500 new folks. Now that's actually kind of astounding when you stop to think about how we generally, we have a lot of different ways of describing how many people are involved in Trinity Cathedral, but by and large, I usually say about 1,500 folks who are kind of in our networks. That's a third of us who are brand new, a third of us who have not necessarily cherished memories of the way things were before. They came in the midst of pandemic, and this is the community that has drawn them in, not a memory of a prior glory day. What's happening right now? A third of us are here because something's happening now. I think that's really exciting. We met our pledge goal for the first time. And this year at church, at the Christmas pageant, we had 10 sheep, 6 cows, 8 angels, 4 shepherds, 6 kings, 1 mouse, a rooster, a reindeer, and a ton of stars. I got to spend this morning prepping for the annual meeting, if you like, here in Church of the Commons. I was in here while you all were in the cathedral next door. And the reason I have the statistic there is we can talk about financial stability, we need to, we talk about program, we talk about our building, we talk about our strategy, we talk about all this stuff. The heart of this place, at least for me, is our kids. It's this new generation coming up, and the ways in which they respond to the core competencies of this community, the way that they teach us about deep beauty and holy compassion and intellectual curiosity. Oh my God, if you want to learn about intellectual curiosity, go spend some time with our kids in Godly Play. And holy compassion, they're our teachers in this. And that's a community of resilience. So we're in a time of chaos. This is a quote from Susan Beaumont. In human organizations, emergence is a naturally occurring pattern of change that happens over time when a group interacts in conditions of upheaval, disturbance, or dissonance. That sounds like a community you might know. The temptation when you're in a period of emergence, a period of liminality, the ending of something, the beginning of something new, when you're in that middle, the temptation is to resolve that chaos by restoring the status quo. Boy, is that a temptation that churches fall into 9 times out of 10. The status quo is our bread and butter. We're often about institutional preservation. This is our 171st annual meeting. So the status quo is a thing here. It's a beautiful thing. There's a reason this community has survived 171 years. And it's time for us to get unsettled, and we are. So what do you do when you're in that moment? My argument, I submit to you that a moment of chaos, a moment of emergence, a moment of liminality is not the time to do strategic planning. It's not the time to set big goals. I don't know what the world's gonna look like in a year, and you don't either. None of us know what the annual meeting of 2023 is gonna look like. What we can do is ask some really provocative questions. And that's actually what you've been hearing about all morning. You heard Jerry talk about, going into this conversation around revenues, fundraising models. And we went to all of our commissions, our ministry groups, thinking that we were going to talk with them about fundraising. And very clearly, it became clear, very quickly, it became clear that conversation needed to be a much broader conversation. It's not just about money. It's about our organization, our structure, our governance. Do we have the right organization to allow our ministries to thrive or not? I don't know the answer to that question, but we're asking it. I think that's a question that we can live with for a year and maybe longer. There's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of questions in our national life right now around race and privilege and white supremacy. So we're doing some of that work at Trinity, and that work has been tricky. I'm not gonna lie to you. There are people who are not in this room because the questions that we're asking are too threatening for them right now. I'm aware of that. Not a lot, but some folks who have said, you know what, this just isn't the conversation I want to be a part of. I'm committed to having that conversation, although I'm aware of how tricky it is. How do we tell a new story about who we have been and why we're here? And who do we want to become as a result of telling that story? That's going to be tricky work. I think it is holy work. We've been hitting some dead ends in our parking lot conversation. That actually goes before the pandemic. And one of the things that I give thanks for is that we didn't move too quickly into parking lot development and end up with a mud pit across the street in the middle of a global pandemic. Or even worse, a 7-story parking garage that we couldn't fill and were in debt over. So thanks be to God, we hit some dead ends in that process and kind of had stalled that process actually before the pandemic shut us down. But it's time to reactivate some of those questions, right? Because we've got, as Jerry said, we've got a beautiful campus. We want to enhance it. We want to restore it. And also, we think it could be more effective as a means of stewardship. So the questions that Lisa Friedman and Richard Whitling are chairing a task force around the building. They're talking to a lot of different members of the community and also a lot of our partners in this neighborhood and even more broadly. We're trying to kind of drill into some of our key partnerships, and we're asking, who are we? What do we do well? What could we do better? I don't know the answer to all those questions, but I think there's some of the right questions to be asking. And we're experiencing a time in which our staff is going to be changing. There's going to be we've sent Gardner Bryce off into the sunset, although we're keeping him around. We're getting ready for a huge change in our life, which is that Katie Bronson is going to be retiring. Oh shoot, I didn't think about this. So Katie's important to my life, and we haven't really talked about how we're going to honor her. But we've got a plan in place for what life at Trinity will look like post-Katie. And I think, can we go ahead and announce it here that Jilly Bronson is that plan? So I don't know how to do my job without a Bronson at my side. We're getting ready to transition Sally Payton. She's been very gracious in sticking around kind of to help us transition. We've got some plans there, but that again, it's a tricky transition process because Sally holds a ton of institutional wisdom. She's been here for forever. She knows where all the bodies are buried. And Shannon and I have talked about this. There's Bruce Neswick, our beloved canon for cathedral music, will be retiring soon. Matthew Lawrence, our canon for spiritual formation, will be retiring within the next couple of, in the next several months. We're beginning to talk about that staging. So there's a whole shift that's happening. Shannon and I have talked about, like in a year, she and I are some of the oldest people around that staff table. That's a little terrifying. And I think, okay, how do we make sure that this community is set up well to recruit and retain the very best employees? Because we have enjoyed that privilege for a long time. We are a high-functioning staff. And we want to make sure that we can continue to recruit really good people and then retain them, right? Pay them appropriately so that they can live good, whole, productive lives and feel good about their job here at Trinity Cathedral. So that's another question that we're going to be asking. These are some of the questions that came to me rather quickly. I think there's probably others. The point of these kinds of questions is that they're not strategy, tactical questions. They're not questions to which I know an answer yet. I think the point of a discernment question, which is really what these questions are. They're questions for discernment. The point of asking a discernment question is that when you ask it, you cannot possibly know the answer. I don't know the answer to these questions. It makes me feel a little weird. I have some ideas. I've got a lot of ideas. But I don't know the answer, and I can't. And you can't either. But we can come to the beginnings of living into these questions, even if they're questions that live with us for the whole rest. I mean, some of us may not be here when the fullness of those answers arrive. We may never answer these questions. We keep asking them because they keep us from being too satisfied with where things are. They keep us from doing the anxious thing of just settling for the status quo. How did we used to do this? Let's just plug and play. This isn't a moment for plug and play. This isn't a moment to just easily go back to what we know how to do, which is strategy and competence and data and goals and objectives. And I mean, all the things that like you all do in your professional life, I do it too. And there will come a time for that again. I believe that those skills, that giftedness in this congregation is a piece of who we are. That will come back. But in this moment, at least for this year, I want to invite you into a different space, which is to get better at sitting with discomfort and uncertainty and engaging in real, honest, searching conversations about who we are and who we've been. There's great beauty associated with who we've been. There's great pain associated with who we've been. We don't have to be those people. We don't have to be that congregation in every way. We can take the best of our past and find our soul and live out of that place. Amen.